I have spent the last 6 years working as a Salesforce developer and making integrations and APIs. And in this video, I'm gonna teach you all of that way shorter, so you don't need to take all the 6 years. I'm gonna save you hundreds of hours, right? So in this video, we're gonna be learning integrations. This is the topic that you absolutely have to learn if you wanna. This is you, right? This is you, and you're a junior. You're a junior, or you're a beginner Salesforce developer, and you want to become the same you, but not a junior anymore. You want to become a senior. A senior. If you don't learn integrations, there's no way you will ever become a senior Salesforce developer. I can tell you that immediately. This is something that took me quite a bit of time to understand, actually. So, in this video, we're gonna make the first request, we're gonna get the response, and we're gonna process this whole response and requesting. And the most important, you will understand every step that goes into this. And after this video, you should be able to go and have a look at the API if you need, and you should be able to do all the other requests on your job or whenever you need to do any other API requests. All right, let's get started immediately. So let's say we have the situation, right? So first we need to understand. First, what are the things that we're gonna be learning? Five things here. We're gonna be first learning what the hell are integrations, what are the APIs, right? So here we're gonna be doing APIs. We're gonna be looking at requests, responses, payload, and then we're gonna write some Apex, right? So the thing about integrations is that you cannot just go and dive immediately into integrations. You have to understand a little bit how the whole internet works and what the hell are even those integrations. All right. So what is an integration? Let's say this is John. This is John, right? What John wanna do is that John wanna buy a course or buy anything, to be honest. Let's say it's a course, right? How would you sell a course through internet to John? You need to have some kind of link, right? So you need to have some kind of payment system. For example, a lot of people know PayPal, right? A lot of people use PayPal, right? And this is what you can use to sell, to generate a payment link for John. Obviously, if you are sitting in Salesforce, if you're a Salesforce developer, you cannot just come up with this link. No, this link, it has to be some kind of payment system link, right? And the most popular one on the internet is Stripe. Let me go stripe.com, right? This is the most popular payment system on the internet, right? Financial infrastructure to grow your revenue. Join the millions of companies that use Stripe. So Stripe is the most popular. I'm using Stripe. Pretty much all the internet businesses using Stripe. Now, why is Stripe so cool? Because Stripe allows us to do very easy API requests, and it's API friendly, and it's basically made for integrations, right? So through this whole video, I'm going to be using the example with the Stripe, but in your head, you can imagine that Stripe is pretty much the same thing as PayPal. Exactly the same thing, right? You could also use PayPal. They just don't have that good of an API, right? Their API is quite good, just not that great as of a Stripe. All right, so we want to sell the course to John, right? So what do we do? What do we do? We go to Stripe, right? We are sitting in Salesforce. We have a Salesforce org. We want to automate this whole process, and we are saying, "Hey, Stripe, I have a customer here, John, and this John, he want to have a payment link. Can I have a payment link?" Right? So we're making here request. Can I have a payment link? And Stripe says, yeah, sure, this is my job to give you payment links. Here's your payment link. Okay? And then you're getting this payment link. So you take this payment link, you save it in Salesforce, and then you maybe use Salesforce to make a request to John, or email John, right? Email. Hey, John, you wanted to buy this course. Here's your link. Okay, link. The John says, "Wow, awesome! I really love it. Nice link." And then John pays for the link, pays for the course, right? So the John pays for the course, but obviously this was a Stripe link, right? So John pays for the course, paid. Now Stripe notifies Salesforce that that transaction was successful. success. And Salesforce says to John, here's your course. Your course. So this is roughly how integrations work. I understand that like it is like, oh wow, so many so many arrows, so much going on, but trust me, by the end of this video you will understand every single thing that's going on here. It's not a big of a deal. So all of this, what you have seen here, you can see that it goes kind of in two directions, right? So we have Salesforce and we have Stripe, right? Those are two actors that are somewhere on the internet. And the way to basically talk to them happens with APIs, right? So here we have like a gateway and we have an API that we can use to speak between them. Now, the thing about API, let me write it down, API, right? The thing about API is that you cannot really see an API. Because a lot of people, they like when they start doing integrations, they're coming to me and they're like, Igor, can you show us an API? I kind of understand what it actually means, but can you actually show us the API? And unless you're this new guy, or how is it, from Matrix, that can like he sees the code, like he looks at the code and he sees like different pictures in the code. Unless you're like that guy, you cannot really see an API. You only can kind of like read API and kind of understand that it's there and use it, but not really like see it in, like you can see a Salesforce object, for example, right? So the API I can show you here. This is an API, right? This is this is an API request. Right? So this request. Now, is this useful? Like by the end of this video, you will be able to read all of that, right? But just what I want to show you is that this whole things that we are speaking, how this Salesforce, right? How this Salesforce and Stripe, how they communicate between each other. All of this is kind of happening through the code, right? So API, if we make more or less official definition, this is code speaking to code. Speaking to code, right? This is kind of the official definition, right? So API, this is something that allows you to speak to other programs, or allows other programs to speak to your server. Another way you can imagine API is this. This is, you're probably fascinated by my drawing skills here, but this is a house. This is a house. How I don't know, 50-year-old might draw it, or maybe better. But anyway, so this is a house, right? If you want to go into a house or into an apartment, you cannot just freaking go through the window or go through the wall. You cannot do that. The only way you can go is through the door. And this door, this is API into your house, okay? So this is the kind of definitions of API, because you're going to be hearing about APIs quite a bit. But don't worry about them, because they only become clear once you write an API, right? Because in Salesforce, you can write an API, you can make, so first of all, Salesforce, they have APIs, and second of all, you can create your own API in Salesforce, right? So don't worry about that. Don't worry for now, at least. You will understand it once you understand how to do it, okay? Stripe API is pretty easy to kind of access, right? So you can go Stripe API, and you can see here the whole API documentation. We're going to come back to this in a second, right? So you don't really need to go way too deep into this. I'm just giving you kind of like vocabulary that you need to understand before we can move forward, okay? So, because as I said, you need to understand a few like theoretical things before we can even write Apex. This is kind of what's strange about this whole integration thing. All right, so we have this image that is a little bit more clean, right? And basically, this is the same image, right? We have request and we have response. And the way it all happens is that from Salesforce, everything in this video is going to be from Salesforce standpoint, right? We are sitting in Salesforce, we're writing some Apex to make this whole automation, and we are making HTTP request. right? This is the first thing that happens, right? We're making HTTP request. Now, what the hell is HTTP, right? What is HTTP? It's hyper. What the hell? I don't. Who cares? Who cares? To be honest, who cares? What the hell is that? The only thing that you need to know is that HTTP is kind of the thing that actually makes the delivery, right? Um, there's obviously some official definition. What the hell is HTTP? I can give you an analogy, right? Let's say you're making like a letter to your grandma, and you're asking for socks. Can I get socks, right, for winter? You're sending this request, and there's a mailman. This is a bag of a mailman. This is the mailman with a nice mustache, and the mailman delivers this to your grandma, right? Grandma. This thing here, what you're sending, that would be the request. That would be the HTTP request. Your grandma, that's kind of like Stripe, right? And the socks that you get back, that would be HTTP response. HTTP response. And when you make this request to Stripe or to your grandma, right, you probably wouldn't speak to your grandma in Chinese if she doesn't speak Chinese, right? Or you wouldn't speak in Ukrainian if she doesn't speak Ukrainian. The same way, when you speak to servers or when you speak to other API on the internet, you need to follow certain guidelines. You need to follow certain requests. You need to follow certain formats. And those formats, this is HTTP, right? So most things, they will be HTTP. So the mailman, in this case, this is the HTTP itself. So HTTP itself delivers the message, okay? This is how it's shown here, right? You can see that kind of the HTTP itself kind of sends the message, right? So we have only three things. We have the HTTP request, we have the HTTP response from Stripe, and we have the HTTP that actually does the heavy lifting, that actually makes the delivery and sends the request and receives the response. So if you can understand all those three things, then you can understand how to make an integration, right? So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna have a look how you can make an HTTP request. But again, we cannot just immediately start with Apex. We have to understand how this request is formatted, right? Because all the HTTP requests, they have to follow the same format, okay? So for that, I need to have a look at my notes. All right, so HTTP request. Let's cover the HTTP request because this is the first thing that we need to understand. And I know that you want to immediately go and write Apex, but trust me, you need to understand those basics, those fundamentals first, right? It's going to be HTTP request. Now, HTTP request is interesting. Let me make it like this. Because it consists out of three parts. 1, 2, and this one's going to be optional. It's going to be number 3. This is an optional one, okay? So the first one in the HTTP request that we're always going to have is going to be endpoint. I'm going to speak about this in a second. Then we have the request type. Come on, where are you? Request type. And then we're going to have body. Or sometimes it's also called payload. Yeah. So those are the three components that you always need to have. Quite frankly, you always need to have this one, endpoint, and you always need to have the request type. You not always need to have the payload. Okay, just depends on what kind of request we have. All right. So come back. Okay. So let's first cover the endpoint, right? What the hell is the endpoint? So the endpoint is pretty easy. Let me put here. Endpoint is basically just the server that you're trying to call, right? So every server, if we come back to this picture, whenever you're trying to call to send like a letter to your grandma, right? A physical letter. Here in Germany, they're super popular. So you're trying to send a physical letter to your grandma. You need to know the address of the grandma and like the name and whatever is the other information. Usually just address and the name, right? And the same is for any kind of API or a server that you're trying to call on the internet, right? You imagine internet, they have a lot of different servers, they have a lot of different websites. When you're trying to call any kind of server that you have, you need to know the address of a server or the address of the API. That would be a better way of putting that. Now, how do you know the address of the API? Usually, you just know it from the API documentation. Sometimes it is different from the actual address of the website. For example, give you a real example, right? So here you can see that. Let me check if you can actually see that. Yeah, you can see that. So here you can see this in the URL. You can see http stripe.com and de. It's probably because I'm in Germany, so it kind of recognized that it should be in English, but it's Germany. Okay, right. So this is the address of the website itself. But then if we go to the API, you can see that the base URL that they show here is api.stripe.com, right? So it's a little bit different, but there is a certain structure to it. Always, all of those endpoints, they're always going to have the same structure, right? You just need to know which one it is, right? Let me give you another example. OpenAI, right? OpenAI. The developers behind ChatGPT, very well known, right? You can see openai.com. This is their website. And OpenAI, if we go to the API platform, right? Why doesn't it bring me to the API itself? OpenAI API, give me API itself. I need the API. Explore the API. I think I need to log in for that. No? API platform, yes. 1 second. Okay, so I had to actually log in into my account to see the API, which sometimes you have to. In this case, you can see there's a lot of different things, but you can see that here we have HTTPS API openai.com v1.responses, right? So this is the endpoint for the responses, right? Then they have also a bunch of different things. So you might have some endpoint that's going to be like from OpenAI, for example, right? You have an endpoint that is responsible for the responses. You have another one that is responsible for videos, for any other things, whatever they have. They have tools, web search, and all those type of things, right? And here you can usually see what is the request that you need to be sending them. But all of that is not important for now. What I'm trying to show you here in this case is that there's certain address that you need to use, and that address is going to follow pretty much the same structure all the time, right? So it's going to be like this. We're going to have a protocol here. This protocol, this HTTPS, this is the most frequent protocol that you're going to see, right? You can even see here on any URLs that you have, it's going to be HTTPS. This is basically means that we're using the mailman that's going to deliver the letter is going to be HTTP. S here at the end, it stands for secure, right? Which is, of course, a big thing that a lot of people love, and everything should be secure. So this is kind of like a new protocol. The previous one was HTTP, just HTTP, but then they it was not secure enough, so they came up with a new one that is going to be HTTPS, which is the secure one. Okay. Then we have two dots. Then we have slash slash, right? All of this, I would put all of this thing as just that's something that's going to be on any endpoint, on any address that you're trying to call. Then you're going to have the main, the core, the API URL, right? Important that this URL, it's not the same or not always the same as the URL of the same business, right? So you can see even the docs here, they have platform.openai.com, but the API is called this API openai.com, right? So different things. Okay. And then usually you have like slash, and then after slash, there can be a bunch of different things. And what comes after this slash, after the main API URL, is kind of depends more or less on the API itself. So in a lot of cases, you'll have some kind of version. So you'll have like v2 or v1 or v4, right? Usually it's not a huge versioning, right? So it's not like it's going to be v15 or something. Yeah, so you have in this, you see OpenAI is pretty known company, but they still v1. Sometimes you see v2. Some companies have v4. I don't think I've seen anything more than v4. But anyway, so you have some kind of version, not always. Sometimes you don't even have the version, and then immediately you go with the responses, right? For example, or apples. Whatever is the path that was designed by the API, that's the path, right? And depending on the path, if you have apples, if you have responses, you might have a different way to communicate with that particular endpoint, right? So you might have the same API, the base of the API, but the path after this API is going to be different. For example, to give you an actual example from Salesforce, you can have contacts, and you have accounts, right? And then you have like the Salesforce before the Salesforce API URL. The contacts will allow you to read the contacts, the accounts will allow you to read the accounts, obviously, right? So you have kind of the same Salesforce org, but you can read different things, right? You can read different things. And if you try to read account from a contacts API, it's not gonna work, it's not gonna give you anything. Then sometimes you'll see some kind of dynamic APIs, right? So it can go like quite a bit, but it's relatively easy to understand once you know what you're building. So I would say we're not going like into these details right now. For now, for me, what's important to understand is that you need to have an endpoint, and this endpoint is always going to follow approximately the same structure. Okay, so it's not going to be very different. All right, so this was about endpoint. Remember, we are speaking about HTTP requests. Let me write the HTTP request. Let me write it a little bit more beautiful than what the hell is that? Then this. Okay. So we have now our nice HTTP request. Okay. Now, this is the endpoint. We have the endpoint. We are done with the endpoint. Let me make it green that we are done with this. Now, request type. This is interesting. So the endpoints are done. Where the endpoints? Here we go. This is the endpoints. Now, request type is pretty simple. It's pretty simple, but it has influence on the body. Okay. So request types, what are the request types? There's a get, post, put, delete. Who knows? What the hell? There's more. There's for sure more, but I can tell you this. Wait, let me actually. There's also patch from those popular one. Patch. But the reason why I'm struggling to remember them is because almost none of them are used. In real life, you'll probably use only get and post, and everything else is going to be what happened here. You'll probably use get and post, and everything here probably you will not be using that much. Of course, obviously you use all of them. Sometimes especially if the API is like really well developed. But in my 6 years that I've been writing those integrations, I can tell you in the most frequent are get and post. So I would really recommend focusing for the beginning only on those two. Okay? There are a couple of differences between them. Get is kind of like a read. So basically get, it specifies that you want to read from the server, right? It's request type. The whole idea behind request types is that we want to specify what kind of action do we expect to perform on the server, right? What is the purpose of our request? Yeah? So if we have a get request, then the whole purpose of our get request is to read something. If we have a post request, like posting on social media, right, then the whole idea behind our request is to give some data. So write, read and write, right? So those are the two most important requests. Now, if you're reading the data, do you need any additional information that you're sending usually? Yes, right? What kind of data are you sending? What kind of data do you want to read? Like if you're reading contacts, okay, do you want to read all the contacts? Do you want to read the contacts that are shared for one specific user? Do you want to read the contacts that are created yesterday, or maybe just one contact with a certain ID, right? So you need to kind of, when you have a read option, you need to specify information that you want to read, and that's it. So you need to specify what you want to read. With a post request, you're usually writing something, and that means that the data is huge, right? So not huge, but you need to have some kind of like data that you add to it. So in this case, a write request, any of the write requests or post requests, they always gonna have body. So in the body itself, you will attach what exactly you want to actually write into the server that you're requesting. In the get, you don't need much of additional information, but what we have in get are headers. This is something that I actually forgot to mention here, that not only we have a body, here, body is not mandatory, right? So body, you might not have it for get requests, but you're always gonna have headers. And headers, let me make it like this. Headers, we're gonna cover in a second. But essentially what I want to tell you is that here you're gonna have either get or post, right? So it's gonna be get or post. Especially if you're a beginner, just focus on those two, and once you're good with them, you can just go and try to do other requests. They're pretty similar. There's nothing too crazy about them. They're pretty much the same, so you don't need to worry about them. Okay. Now, the reason why I kind of forgot about headers is because they're really not that important, and because usually you get, especially like in the beginning, you get a lot of them automatically, okay? So you don't really need to care too much about them automatically. If we go back to our analogy with the mailman, then a header would be something like sometimes people put like a big stamp on it on a letter called fragile or something like this, right? So the headers that you have will be like a content. What kind of content are you sending? We will cover this once we cover how to do the payload, how to do the body properly, okay? So that's going to be the content, that it's a JSON, right? It's a JSON. Then there's going to be some authentication information in the header, depending on what kind of server you have. And that's pretty much it. There's gonna be a lot of additional information. Like you can go to any website, you can go here to the inspect, and you can go to the network, and you can see let me retry it. You can see a lot of requests, and you can see the general, you can see the headers, right? So they're gonna be responses and requests, right? So you can see the headers. They're usually origin, something like your information about your Mac or your browser, right? There's cross-origin stuff. There's content type, in this case just text, right? So those things, they're usually not that super important. Sometimes you would work with headers and you would set them. So it's not true that you're not using them at all, right? So you're using them for authentication, for example, which is a whole different topic that you don't need to care about. But for now, as of this moment, you don't really need to do anything with headers, okay? So forget about headers for now. We don't care about them. That's that's pretty much it about headers, right? We don't care about them. At this point for beginning, okay, this is for the beginning. Later, when you do the whole integrations, when we covered everything, then maybe you can go into the headers and play around with them. Nothing too crazy, trust me. Okay, so this was the request. This is the structure of the request, okay? Now, if you look at this, you're gonna have a response, right? You're gonna have a response from the server. So you call, now you know how the format of calling a Stripe or another server looks like, right? This is the format that you're gonna be using in Salesforce to call another server. Now, the response will also be formatted in a certain way, right? Because remember, we need to have kind of like a shared language of the internet. We need to be able to communicate with each other on the internet, and for that we need to agree on the same format. Okay, so for that we're gonna have the HTTP response. I'm just gonna copy what we have here, just gonna copy it so we can have a look. So let's copy HTTP request. The reason why I'm copying it is because it's gonna be so similar to what we have here with the request, right? Okay, so that's gonna be response, HTTP response. Now, the only difference here is, let me go back here. So you're gonna have headers the same way as you had them before. Yeah, you have headers. You're gonna have, you're not gonna have endpoints, right? So you have headers, you don't have endpoints. And instead of request type, you're gonna have, why is it not allowing me to type status code? Okay, and on top of that, you always going to have the body. In this case, it's going to be always there. Now, why is it the case? Because no matter if you're making a GET request or a POST request, you're always going to have some kind of response, and this response usually contains some information, right? You might have this body being empty, but the body is always going to be there, okay? So this is kind of the difference. Now with the headers, we already covered the headers, right? So we don't need to cover the headers. They're done. You know how it looks like. The body, we will cover a little bit later. So because this is like a big topic, how it should look like, I'm gonna show you a little bit later. And the status code, this is the most important. So I have here in my notes, I have something prepared for you for the status code. Here we go. This thing here. Okay. So you see here all the status codes that are possible. In general, they are separated into kind of like 3 main categories. Now, first of all, what the hell is a status code? A status code is essentially a way to signal in the response how the server worked with your request. So you did a request, and in this request, there can be 3 main things that can happen. The first thing is that it was successful and was okay. It was all good, right? This is the most frequent one that you're gonna see, 200 okay. This is whenever you see that, it means nice. Everything was perfect, okay? Everything was done very well. There are few more kind of like success messages that you can see there. I don't see them that frequent. Usually the APIs, they're not that crazy developed, and people just don't care and they just smash everything in 200, which is totally fine. It's not a big deal. So everything that is 200 something something, right? 200, 201, 203, blah blah, you immediately know it's okay, it's good. Yeah. Then the next level is that if you mess up your request, right? This is your problem. Okay? If you get 400 anything, 400, 401, the most known 404 not found, right? If you get any of those 400, that means that you messed up. Okay? So usually it means it's unauthorized, or with a 404, it means that you're trying to access an endpoint. Remember, if we go back, you're trying to access an endpoint. Here, maybe you made a mistake and you wrote here like responses with a C at the end, right? And this endpoint just does not exist. Then it's going to say, oh, does not exist, not found, right? So this basically means that it's on you. You made such a request that the server does not understand. And this is also usually relatively easy to fix, because you just know that you need to kind of debug your request and see, okay, why am I trying to make a request that the server does not understand? Okay. And then we are going to the 500s. And the 500s are probably the most annoying one, because that means this is a server mess up. Server messed up, right? So now the mistake is not on you, it's on that server. So for example, there can be a case, let's say you have here your Salesforce org and you have another server. You make a request, and this is a request to start doing some action, right? Start doing some action. For example, you're requesting it to print you a t-shirt, like to print you something on the t-shirt. Whatever is that example. And while it's printing something on the t-shirt or printing you the piece of paper, for example, it says, okay, I'm out of ink. I cannot print anything. So the whole system just crashes, just crashes down, because the developers of that server didn't think about this. The whole system just burns and crashes down, and that in this case you would get 500. Yeah. 500 usually means that you just need to wait a little bit, and then you can retry your integration, retry your APIs, because if there's some mess up on the server, then this is strange. Yeah. This also can be sometimes when you have like 500 something, it also means that either the servers are overloaded, or maybe you're just making such a request. You're like a small hacker there. You made such a request that basically made everything go down, or not everything, but the part of the integration that's responsible for that, right? So 500 is not something that you would get very frequent, but that would be something like you're like, oh, wow, okay, interesting, 500. Oh, wow, what the hell is going on? But usually you would get 400 something or 200 something. And those are the status codes, right? So those are the responses to your requests, and they allow basically to very quick signal what is the status of your request, right? You requested something, then you see 200, bam, you know that it was good. If you're still following me, I think this video worth a like, because we've been covering quite a bit already, and I hope that you're not lost by this time, because I promise you, once we go to writing Apex, if you understand at least 20-30% of what we talked about, by this point, you will understand how to make an HTTP request and response. Okay, so now we have the body, the payload. And this is a huge thing to explain, okay? So I have here my notes. Let me have a look at them. Basically, this whole body or payload, it's relevant for two cases. In first case is that you're making a post request. What the hell is that? You're making a post request. Right? And in second case, you're making GET request, GET request, or any other request, right? But we are focusing on those two, and you're getting some kind of payload back. You're getting something, some kind of information back. For example, it can be a list of contacts, right? You have another Salesforce org. That Salesforce org has an API that you can talk to. You make a request, and this Salesforce org, it gives you a list of all the contacts, right? That would be a payload. That would be the body of the request. In this case, how this whole thing looks like. It is actually pretty simple, but still requires some explanation. So we have HTTP payload. Okay, HTTP payload. Now this HTTP payload, you need to know that it has two main formats. It has a JSON, or some people call it somehow differently, but I call it JSON, and it has XML. Those are two most important formats. Now the truth is that this XML should just never existed. No, I mean it had its own place. It has like own place in like banking, maybe some systems out of 90s, something. So it exists. Unfortunately, it does exist, but since you're not coding with the systems from 90s, if you're working with like more or less modern APIs, let's say those that were developed in the last like 15, 20 years, then probably you're not going to be working with XML at all. I remember having one project with the XML, and I wish I never had that project, but I had it. So the XML, forget about this. We don't want to touch this. Instead, we have JSON, and JSON it's okay. Let's do here the official one. It's JavaScript object notation. Oh, now we're going into official definitions, right? So JavaScript object notation, short for JSON. Now, does it mean you're gonna have to write JavaScript? No, doesn't have that much to do with the JavaScript. It is using the stuff from JavaScript. It is somehow related to JavaScript, but you don't need to worry about that at all, right? I'm gonna explain you what the hell is a JSON. Now, I assume if you're interested for integrations, you have basic Apex skills, of course, because if you don't, then go watch my videos, other videos, to understand what the hell is going on. But so if you have a basic Apex understanding, then you probably know what the hell is a map in Apex, right? A map is basically like a table. And trust me, I'm gonna explain you what the hell is JSON. Just starting is always starting very far. Right, so map is a table with a key and value, right? And JSON, here we go, my writing. JSON is a map. Okay? So it's exactly the same concept. You have a key and you have a value. Now, the key can be anything. So let me give you an example. It's just reading a little bit strange, the JSON. So here's an example. We have two curly brackets, and then inside we have key, and then we have value. If you look at them, you can see that this is essentially a map, right? They kind of fit into this thing here, right? They fit into this. Just they have a little bit of syntax around them. Let me put them like this. Yeah. So you can see it has key and the value. Now the key, it always have to follow this format. You always need to have the double quotes in JSON, yeah? Then some kind of string, text, right? And then you need to close the double quotes. In JSON, you have to do that, okay? This is mandatory. Also, the JSON has to be enclosed into these brackets. Then, between the pairs, you always need to have the colon, and then the value doesn't need to have the double quotes, okay? The value can be actually without the double quotes. And then if you want to have another pair, then you just put comma. 1 second. Okay, so you just put comma, and then you would start with another key, then value, then you put comma, and like this until the end, and then you put the closing bracket. Okay, so this is a JSON. Now as the key, you will always have text, or more professionally to say string, right? And as the value, you can have one of those 6 types. So I have them here in my notes. You can obviously have string, right? Then you need to put the quotes. You can have number. You can have boolean. You can have null, object, or array. Notice how we say that this is an array, not a list. Not a list, right? List, that would be if you speak about something that is in Apex. But since this is a JavaScript object notation, instead of saying a list, we say array, because this is the JavaScript type, okay? We don't care about those things. This is not that relevant for us. Just kind of explaining to you why do we have exactly those types. Also, the same goes for a number, right? We don't say integer or decimal or long or double or whatever the other number types we have in Apex, right? We say number, which incorporates all of those types in there. And I'm telling you this to kind of show you that there's no direct correlation between Apex and like Salesforce types that you have, and you cannot just take them and directly translate into the JSON. You need to do some kind of magic. You need to do a little bit of parsing. This is the topic for a little bit later. I'm gonna show it to you, don't worry. But just showing you that this JSON is not something that was developed inside of Salesforce, right? It's the way we speak on the internet. It's the language how different servers on the internet communicate with each other. And it was initially kind of like part of the JavaScript. Right, so we have all of this, right? Now, here I have an example for you for a JSON. No, not this. For a JSON that kind of incorporates all of the types. So you can have a look how it looks like in real example. What you can see here is that we have the first one type is that string, right? And then you can see the second type is with those double quotes. So it means on the right side as the value we have a string as well. Then you can see 2.5, which is obviously a decimal, right? But you can see that there is no double quotes there. We have a boolean, true. We have a null, which is null. We have object, and you can see, and this is very important part. Okay, this is important to understand that JSON can have other objects as the values. So you can see that this part, the right part, it's always the string, right? You can see it's always with the double quotes. But the right part, the values, it can be different. In this case, it can be even another object, which it is in this case, right? You can see this by opening the curly brackets. You always create a new JSON object, right? And inside you can write whatever you want. So that allows us to basically create a big branching, to create an object inside of an object, inside of an object of an object, and this way to create like a hierarchy inside of the one JSON. But you can see that all the objects, they're always going to start with an opening curly bracket, and they're always going to be stopping with a closing curly bracket, okay? The next one is array, and which would be kind of like a list in Apex, but arrays, they are a little bit different, because list in Apex, it can only have the same data type, right? So it usually in Apex you would say list of strings, right? Stuff like this, list of strings. Now in this case, and you wouldn't be able to put like an integer inside, right? In this case, you have array with a string, number, boolean, null, an object, right? So basically all the data types inside of one list, which is fine, right? Or you can have even an array of objects, which is kind of also a type of array. And inside of those objects, you can go more and more and more, and you can go up to infinity, basically how many objects inside of objects you can have. And this whole format, this is how internet speaks, right? This is the internet language. You can kind of see it like this. So if you for example open a browser, right? I open any browser, I open whatever, I open here this one, right? If I refresh it right now, my computer is gonna make a request to that server, and back it's gonna get a JSON response. So all the communication happens in JSON all the time. So you can see that if we're gonna be communicating with Stripe from Salesforce, right? If we go back to this image, where do we have it? This one, right? If we're gonna be communicating with Stripe using the JSON, we would need to have some kind of parsing around, because this JSON format is pretty different in comparison to how we work with stuff in Apex. But I'm gonna show you how to do that. There are many ways how we can deal with this. The most important what I want you to understand from here is that you just need to just have a look at those JSON and just see how they work. It's not a big deal. Here you can see different examples. So if we go, for example, go to customers, you can see how it's going to look like, right? So you can see kind of the same structure here. I just opened Stripe API, random something, right? Customer object, doesn't really matter. You can see that here's the example of what you're gonna get if you make this particular request. What you're gonna get, right? So if you, for example, if you make this type of request, right? Java. Let's see, do we have? This is more clear for me personally to read. So like if you make this type of request, and you can see it has only basically here the endpoint, right? You send this email. This is the response that you're gonna get, okay? And you can see that here in voice settings, this is a separate object here, right? So JSON, it's pretty simple. It's just a map, key, value. The only difficulty about JSON is that it can kind of be like an object inside of the object inside of the object. Yeah, that's the only difficult part about that. I guess that's pretty much it. What you need to know about the basics, right? So now when you look at this picture here, I hope that you can understand the format, that how it's all happening. You're in Salesforce, you want to request something from another server, you formulate the HTTP request, you send this request, and you get the response. You get the response in the JSON format, right? And then you take this JSON format and you parse it into something that Salesforce can understand. Now, how exactly it's going to be looking in Apex, I'm going to show you in a second. I hope you're ready to write some Apex. I hope so, because it's going to be really easy. It's not going to be hard. Okay, so after hour of yapping, basically, it's time to make the first request. And the way we're going to do it for this particular example is I created a new server, right? It has the, no, what the hell is that? Wait, where's my server? Let me get it. Here we go. This one, right? So this is a server. It does a very simple thing. It just returns statically or this whole thing JSON, right? By the way, if you want, there's a JSON crack. Like this, JSON crack. It's pretty cool. You can go to the editor there, and you can visualize, right? So you can paste in here your JSON that you have, and it's gonna visualize for you the JSON, right? If you have any troubles with this. All right, so we have this server that I created specifically for this example. So it's what are we gonna do? If you look at this, what we want to get there is the payment link. Here, the payment link, right? you can imagine this is just a static payment link, right? It's nothing crazy. We don't want to have like multiple payment links for all the other people. That would defeat the whole purpose of this video to make a simple request, right? So if you look where we have this whole payment link, it will be here, right? It will be here, and it will be in the pair object, right? Another thing that you can do is a JSON formatter, and there are plenty of different formatters. You can format them, right? So you can see more in a structured way. So what you can see here is that we have the whole JSON, and then we have a pair object, and inside of this pair object we have a link, right? So we want to get this link, and we want to just display it to the logs. That's the whole idea. We're going to make a request, we're going to get the link, and we're going to display it, right? We're not going to be connecting it to the triggers. You can do it on your own, because I assume that you already know how to work with all of that. Now, before we can even make a request again in Salesforce, we have to add a few things. So first, we need to add a remote site. Remote site setting. So we go to the remote site setting and we add the new remote site. This is because you cannot just make any kind of request, like random requests that's gonna go to all the possible websites, partly because of the security, partly because Salesforce just want you to be kind of mindful about what kind of requests are you doing in your org. So because of that, we have you need to specify the URL of what you're trying to do, right? So in my case, by the way, URL, if you want to follow, there's going to be a link in the description for the written version of the same video, of like mini course, that you can go and you can just read everything, and you can, depending how you like more video or reading, you can find all the code in there, you can find all the links in there. I really recommend you doing that. Okay, so we have our payment link here. You don't need to specify the path, you only need to specify the domain, right? And here I'm gonna say it's gonna be mock postman for me. Save, right? So now we registered that we're gonna be doing callouts to this URL. Okay, now we can do the actual first callout, right? The way you do it is that you go here to the developer console, right? You know how to open developer console, I hope. At this point, I'm just assuming you know how to do that. Obviously, when you do a real integration, you would probably integrate somewhere in Apex, and you wouldn't use the developer console. But I find developer console pretty nice to just make very quick requests and like show you a couple of things. So that's what I'm gonna be using right now. Okay, so let's go back to this thing, right? We have our HTTP request and HTTP response. Let me delete all this additional stuff that we have here, right? Blah, blah, blah. If you look at this, you already understand all the parts that are inside there, and we will be just following this whole thing. Now, the best thing about Apex is that it allows you to do already a lot of stuff that is built into Apex. And this HTTP request and HTTP response and HTTP are separate classes in Apex. We are quite lucky that we have this HTTP request and HTTP response classes in Apex, and they literally look like this. HTTP request equal to new HTTP request. Okay, so this is our request. And now with this request, the only thing that you need to do is to fill out all those things that we spoke about. You need to fill out the headers that you actually don't need to fill out in this case, because it's going to be already filled out by Salesforce automatically. You need to fill out the endpoint and the request types, and that's pretty much all you need to do, right? So if you understand what we've been talking all about all the time, then you will understand what is going on here, and it's pretty easy. So request dot set method. The method is going to be get, right? So we look here, request type, by the way, sometimes it's called request method. It's the same thing, right? Method. Okay, so we have the set method. We're setting that it's going to be a get. If you set it to post, then you would need to append the body at the end, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't make much sense. But in this case, we're just requesting something. Okay, so we're gonna have request and then dot, And now we're gonna set the end point. And the endpoint, remember what was our endpoint? I have it somewhere here. There's the endpoint. So we're setting the whole endpoint in there. And this is already our request. So this is simple. Now remember the picture. The HTTP is the one that actually does the heavy lifting. So HTTP is the thing that sends this whole thing, right? So first, let's create HTTP variable like this. And now we're gonna get an HTTP response using the HTTP. So HTTP dot send request. Simple. Da-da-da-da! The confetti. But this is, if you look at this, it is relatively straightforward. Once you understand what are all of these responses and requests, what is going on there. This is why we've been doing for like an hour already, the whole theory around to understand what the hell is that. Because once you understand that point, understanding this is super easy. It's just very simple Apex. There's nothing to learn in there. So now we have system.debug here, and we have response, right? So let's just print it out. We're not gonna go like heavy into heavy Apex stuff. We're just gonna print out the response. So let's see how it looks like. I'm gonna click on execute. So no errors. This is good. I'm gonna click on debug, and here we go. You get status OK, and the status code 200. Remember the status codes that we discussed, right? Okay, now this is good. But where's this whole thing, right? We want to have a link there. Where's all of that? Well, all of that is hidden in the body, right? The way to get body, we say get body. Very simple. Execute, and let's see again. And now we can see the whole body, right? And you can see that all of that is here on line 7, right? So all of that is basically on the line 7. And since it's on the line 7, it means it's just one big string, one huge string that we have here. String, let's call it response body, like this, and we're gonna print out the response body. So let me execute this thing again, and debug only, like the same thing on the line 8. Right? So basically, you see, we just made the first request. We got the response. We got the body. Awesome. So congrats on that. This was very easy from the Apex standpoint. But if I were to start with all of this, you would have absolutely no idea what the hell are those requests, responses, what are the methods, how they look like, right? But if you look at this is just 8 lines of code, which is very simple to understand. There's nothing crazy about this, okay? So we have this. But now, one thing that is still missing is that we want to get the payment link, right? The payment link. And this is the part that is a little bit more tricky. So up until this point, I was not expecting from you any kind of crazy Apex skills. Now, this is where you already need to be at least a little bit good with Apex. You cannot be just a complete beginner and understand what's going to happen. Okay? What we're gonna do is that we're gonna parse it. We're gonna parse it. Parse. The reason why it's a little bit tricky is because we are basically transforming the format that internet understands into the format that Salesforce understands, okay? And this transformation, it requires us to work with maps or with classes, depending how we want to work with them, okay? So there are multiple approaches, as I said. You can work with classes, you can work with maps. I'm gonna show you how to work with maps, right? Because at this point, the whole response is basically just one big string. It's nothing that we can work with. Okay, so we are trying to get a link, right? So we want to have like a string. We want to have it in the separate variable. String, let's say payment link equal to something. Yeah. We have a beautiful, nice method called JSON I'm gonna now look it up. JSON dot deserialize untyped. There's also another one which is called JSON deserialize, just like this. You can use both of them to parse the response. And by the way, parse is just a fancy name for taking one format to another format. Okay, so you can use both of them to parse. I will use, for this particular example, I will just use the deserialize untyped. Okay, so deserialize untyped. Now, remember that JSON is basically just a map. And since it's just a map, we can parse it into a map. It can be represented with a map, right? So let's go back to just kind of refresh this part. This is JSON, yeah? It has a key and the value. Now, the key is very easy because a key in Apex we can represent with a string. Yeah, it's easy. But the value, it doesn't really have the Salesforce values in it, right? The Salesforce values would be lists. It wouldn't be a number, right? It wouldn't be array. It would be a list, integer, and decimal. And this is why this thing we can represent with object. Now, this is where you need to understand what are those objects. So this is not a video on Apex. So I just assume that you know that Apex classes, they have the parent, the most parent class of them, which is called object, and they all inherit from the object. But if you don't, then Google this, Google this, and come back to the video. But we can represent the value with an object. So essentially, any JSON that you get in your Apex will be string to object map. Okay? String to object map. Now, that means that we can also deserialize it and put it into this map. So I'm going to create a map. I'm going to say string and an object, right? And here I'm going to name this variable something like response map equal to, and now I'm going to use this JSON deserialize untyped. And what I'm going to deserialize untype, I'm going to deserialize untype the body. Now, if you look up this method, what you'll see that it returns an object, actually not a map. Okay, so what we need to do is that we need to cast it into a map. Again, if you're not familiar with Apex, this is the reason why you need to be at least somehow good in Apex before you start with the integrations, right? This is the reason why I don't recommend beginners to go immediately into integrations. This is the reason why you need to understand stuff like triggers, like object-oriented programming before you start with integrations. So if you're confused with this part, you need to go and kind of learn those things before, okay? All right, so we have the response body. We are parsing it into this map, and now because it's a map, we can just use the keywords, right? So what we can do is that we can just get the pair, right? We can just get the pair object. So if you look at this, we can get this whole another object. Yeah, we're getting the pair. The way we get it is just by using the usual our response map dot get pair. And now I'm gonna do the exact same trick as I did before. I'm gonna parse this whole thing into a map. Okay, so I'm gonna say the map, this map, that is a pair object. Yeah, so when you look at this, let me make it a little bit smaller so you can see basically the full code here. You can see that we are doing the same trick. Just one thing to keep in mind, that we can always represent any JSON using the maps, okay? So now we have the map, and now since we have the pair and it's just a map, we can just system.debug pair.get, and now we need to have a look what is the key link. That's the key, right? So we get link, and here we go. Let's see if it's gonna work. Execute. And let's make it a bit bigger so we can see. No. Interesting. Oh yeah, stupid mistake. Okay, so link here has a white space. Okay, that was the mistake with the white space. Yeah. Pretty stupid. But anyway, let's execute this. And here we go. And we have the payment link. So boom, congrats, you did your first integration, and then you can use it to like plug into trigger, do whatever you can imagine doing with this whole integration. Also, if you want to have everything that we discussed here with a written form, you can get all of that for free, the integration mini course, just by clicking the links below. That was pretty much it. Thank you. See you in the next one.